Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Entitled Parents. Story 1. Entitled family harasses me after my BF knocks BIL on the ground. So this story happened a week ago. My sister was in town to visit with her husband and 11-year-old son. My BF isn't a huge fan of my sister's husband. By BIL is as my BF would describe tactic cool. Basically he's really into military stuff even though he never was in the military. While my BF was a US Marine for 5 years. When they met, my BIL tried to act all buddy-buddy and even said these people don't understand warriors like us. My boyfriend finds it annoying both that my BIL is trying to claim warrior status while being a banker and my BF is not fond of the military after all it did to him, so he gets ticked off when people idolize it. But the problem started when they came over. It was a generally nice night other than a passive-aggressive remark by the BIL when he learned I was not cooking, but in fact my BF is. I'm a terrible cook and he's amazing at it, so he generally cooks. After dinner we were all getting caught up in the living room and their son Jack was getting bored and started walking around. My BF got up after him to watch over him as an excuse to get out of the conversation. This is what my BF said happened. He followed Jack around the house until Jack said he was bored. Trying to be a good uncle, my BF offered to show him his office and they went inside. My BF is protective of his office, only him and I are allowed inside, so this was a big deal, but my BF wanted to be a good host and uncle. So he showed Jack around the office, showed him his warmer armies, the knives he forges, his gaming PC, and everything else. BF has too many hobbies, until they got to a locked cabinet. Jack asked why it was locked. My BF explained his guns were in there and if his parents allowed it he would take Jack shooting one day. A little while later my BIL followed them into the office. My BF was annoyed he was in there but felt he couldn't kick him out as his son was in there and he had the right to be there. BIL started talking to him about my BF's guns and wanted to see them. My BF was hesitant but felt there was no harm because BIL is a grown-ass man, also he keeps the ammo in the garage across the house. He opened the cabinet and asked my BIL not to touch them unless he hands them to him. My BIL promptly ignores this, grabs a gun from a rack, does not check if it's clear. My BF emphasizes that it was a huge no-no, and starts waving it around. My BIL then thought it would be funny to pretend to shoot his son, so he pointed the gun at Jack. My BF reached for the gun, knocked BIL to the ground and secured the gun. Then all hell broke loose. BIL started screaming at my BF and my sister ran to check what was going on. Then my sister started screaming about how my BF could let her son near a gun. My BF isn't a yeller. He's not afraid of confrontation but he never yells. He just calmly put his gun away, locked the cabinet, looked at me with a "these people are idiots" look, and waited for a lull in the screaming. He told them get the fuck out. BIL got in his face and acted like they were gonna fight. My BF just started him down until BIL backed off. BF's 6'3", muscular and carries himself like a former Marine. He basically just stared my sister and BIL out of the house, never raised his voice, never said anything threatening. But after that the story my family was told is that he's a sociopath with an arsenal, has PTSD, and all of them are blowing up my phone trying to get me to leave him. Apparently they even called the cops, but we live in his hometown. The local sheriff taught my BF how to hunt as a kid, so the sheriff knew it was a BS report but still reached out to me to confirm. I assured him and my family countless times that he is not dangerous or hurting me. It's starting to get to me and I don't know what to do. My BF is concerned for my mental health but he told me he couldn't care less what they were saying about him. I'm probably gonna go low contact until this blows over. I'm just glad we live a couple states away so they can't harass me in person. Story 2. Are my parents narcissists? What are your experiences? This may be the wrong sub, so apologies. I'm a fully grown adult with a lot of anxiety, guilt, and a fairly negative self-image. I struggled a lot in my late teens. Early 20s but really pulled myself together mid-20s. Lately a pretty awful and unexpressed loss sent me spiraling. It was a loss that took my breath and soul. Where you want to die even though you've your own family to care for because you can't believe this happened. Anyway, This loss caused me to go to therapy, and that essentially led to topics around my severe anxiety and low self-worth. It made me talk about things in my childhood that happened. I wanted to share a few things my parents did. For a bit of context, I was a normal child. Not particularly talented or anything, but did fine in school, had friends and hobbies. As a teenager I started to struggle a lot with anxiety but had great friends. I was not an easy teenager but by no means hard. I never did drugs, get kicked out of school, sleep around or commit any crimes. Nothing that might explain why your parents were at their wits' ends with you. I did talk back and I was definitely moody. I hated being around people and just spent most of my time in my room. So here are some of the events. As a young child I choked on a piece of meat. This caused a serious fear of swallowing, and I would shove as much food in my mouth as possible, then run to the bathroom and flush it down the toilet. Or spit it into tissue and hide in my pocket to later flush. Anyway, it inevitably blocked the toilets and I was caught. I was screamed at and my mother dragged me to the car and drove me to the hospital and said they would shove a tube down my throat and force me to eat. I tried explaining to her I was scared after choking, and her and my dad called me a liar because I could always eat dessert. This is true, I could. I don't know why I was never as scared with desserts, but it was always soft desserts. I could also eat soup, and to this day soup is one of my favorite meals. Secondly, after a not very good parent-teacher meeting at 14, usual stuff, talks to her friends instead of listening, could apply herself more. Nothing too bad. My mother screams at me though I'm the only one in the family who causes them such embarrassment. I fight back and again results in me being dragged into the car and drove to the police station. She tells me she doesn't want me in the family anymore and the police will find me a new family. LOL, I was 14, I knew this wasn't going to happen. If it was possible at the time I probably would have skipped in. Next, due to severe anxiety I end up failing exams. I just couldn't focus and cried all the time. Again told I was a failure, not wrong in this case, brought so much embarrassment to the family, and my mom repeatedly asked how she's meant to face her friends who will all be asking how I did. It was probably the lowest point of my life. Now on to my dad. A few years after this I had repeated and got my exams, finished college, and had a decent job. It didn't earn much but it was a job with good potential and I was living on my own and so much happier. My dad rings and asks me to take out a loan for him. The banks won't let him take it out and he's stuck. He will pay me back in a few months. He specified April. Of course I do, and it doesn't get paid back. I don't get a thank you and I am now paying off a loan I can't really afford and I didn't even see a cent of the money. He has also been stealing from me when I worked as a waitress and got paid in cash, but I never had the heart to confront him. It was only a couple of €100. Years later me and my dad have a fight over a broken mug. The first present my husband got me, it meant a lot to me and my family knew it. My dad broke it and didn't even acknowledge it. Obviously a broken mug isn't really a big deal, but I guess there was built up anger. The fight escalated and I mentioned the loan and how I never even got a thank you or acknowledgement. He calls me a bitch, selfish, and just screams at me for ages. I leave to stay at my husband's parents that night, and although my dad apologized he still doesn't acknowledge the loan and says I just always thought you were so strong so I assumed you were fine. Anyway, is this narcissism or just general family dynamics with a twist of toxic? Story 3. Am I wrong to have no desire to connect with my dad anymore? I don't know where to go to get help on this, so I hope it's okay if I post here. I was closer to my dad growing up than I am now. My parents divorced in around 2005, when I was either 6 or 7, so most of my life with my parents had been back and forth trips on weekends, and divided holidays. My mom had custody of me and my brother technically, but there was no separating us from our dad. It was a pretty amicable divorce. We had shared time for years and it didn't seem to affect our relationship with our parents, until I guess when I started high school. My dad used to drink a lot, but I don't remember him as a heavy drinker at all. I just remember him as my dad. Maybe I was too young to notice, because my older brother remembers it more than I do. My dad met a woman who did help him sober up more, but also got him on the born-again Christian pipeline, and it completely changed his personality. My dad met this woman when I started high school, who is now his wife. When they first got together it was fine, but quickly my dad decided to move almost an hour away from our hometown, and still expected me and my brother to fulfill the same amount of visits after school and on weekends. Both my brother and I began to hate going back and forth. I remember I used to get so angry because I was constantly trying to do school work on school nights after driving an hour to go see my dad. I was an honors high achiever type that had a lot of homework, only for him to get annoyed that I was paying more attention to my school work than him. It became a struggle of giving my dad all the attention he wanted rather than what I wanted or needed, and because of this I started to resent him. I resented that he didn't take me or my brother's time into account. One Christmas, he made us drive an hour through a snowstorm on Christmas Eve, and the storm continued through Christmas Day as we drove home to see our mom's side of the family. My brother just had gotten his license and I was 13 or 14. I remember that so vividly because I think that's when I realized his narcissistic tendencies. He changed so much because of his wife. He became almost like a completely different person. He isn't the dad I used to know, and when that started to happen I also resented his wife. Even though, it was probably good for him that he was sobering up because of her. But I didn't recognize him anymore, and I would get into fights with both of them on visits. I hated her for changing him. I didn't feel like I could connect with him anymore. Me and my brother were not raised in religion, we were given the choice to choose what we wanted to believe. But once he changed, he began to try to impose all of his beliefs on us. My brother seems to be able to let it roll off his shoulder pretty easily. For me, it drove me insane. My political beliefs as well are the polar opposite of my dad's. I'm very progressive and he is very conservative. I don't want to get into any debates on here, but I feel like this context is also important to mention because it affected my view of my dad intensely. I didn't want it to, but when it started to involve hate towards women, I felt it personally and it hurt. It's like everything I believe into him is devil worship. It's like he feels the need to save me from myself. With all of this being said, it's very hard for me to understand him, and it's hard for him to understand me. And it would be fine with me if we just didn't talk about any of it, but it's like he is a missionary and feels like it's his duty to change me and my entire personality. I've had multiple conversations with him about how I don't want to share our beliefs anymore, because it does more harm than good. It's like an incessant thing that he feels that he needs to talk to me about. I don't feel much of a connection to him anymore. It feels shallow and artificial, and seeing him feels like an obligation or a chore to me. He is trying to stay connected with me and I appreciate that he is trying. He is trying to find basis for what we can connect on that doesn't involve religion or politics. But I can barely give him the time of day anymore. I feel guilty about it, but I'm 25 now and I have so much going on in my life that needs my attention more. I just don't know how to connect with him anymore, and I'm okay with that, but he isn't. He is constantly trying to be in my life, and I feel horrible about it, but I am so much more comfortable with the distance that I've created between us. Everyone tells me that I should try to stay connected more. Am I doing something wrong by not wanting him super involved in my life? TLDR, my dad changed his personality completely and I don't know how to connect with him anymore, and don't really care to. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.